Barrister Maxwell Opara claims he met Nnamdi Kanu recently, and government officials have been offering Nnamdi Kanu deals to abandon the Biafra agitation. The offers allegedly include withdrawing from the struggle, joining a political party, and receiving large financial incentives. One alleged offer includes 50 billion naira and an oil well in the Niger Delta, which Nnamdi Kanu rejected. According to Barrister Maxwell Opara, Nnamdi Kanu insists he must continue fighting for Biafra's freedom rather than accept personal gains. Barrister Maxwell Opara believes Nnamdi Kanu's imprisonment is a punishment for refusing government offers, not for committing crimes. Several figures, including activists, lawyers, and government insiders, have publicly hinted that Nnamdi Kanu is detained because he rejected political offers. He predicts that the government will eventually beg Nnamdi Kanu to come out and negotiate. He connects the current political climate to renewed calls for restructuring Nigeria. He argues that restructuring was the original cause of the Biafra conflict, referencing the Aburi Accord between Ojukwu and Gowon. According to him, Britain influenced Nigeria to abandon restructuring because it would not favor British interests. Before his arrest and imprisonment, Nnamdi Kanu has appeared in countless number of videos condemning killings in Nigeria and urging global attention to injustice. Nnamdi Kanu originally advocated for restructuring, not independence, but the government rejected all proposals. Since the government refused to listen to him, he started clamoring for self-determination. Omoyele Sowore during a live podcast is quoted saying, "Nnamdi Kanu wants a Nigeria where Igbo people can survive fairly, but considers unity impossible under current structures." Omoyele Sowore also says, Nnamdi Kanu believes a referendum and adherence to constitutional protocols could end bloodshed. He argues that Nnamdi Kanu turned to full Biafra agitation only after Nigeria rejected restructuring talks. He questioned why a supposedly criminal suspect like Nnamdi Kanu would be offered deals instead of simply tried, suggesting political motives. Omoyele Sowore notes that Nigeria has a long-standing Igbo problem rooted in the unresolved trauma of the Civil War. He recounts historical injustices such as pogroms, seized property, and systemic discrimination before and after the war. He highlights Nnamdi Kanu's past statements about self-defense against killings by armed groups like Fulani herdsmen, and concludes that Nigeria's problems persist despite Nnamdi Kanu's detention, implying that he is not the country's problem, but that the structure of Nigeria is fundamentally flawed. This news update discusses in detail the long, complex, and controversial situation surrounding Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB. It begins with a claim from Barrister Maxwell Opara, the legal counsel to Nnamdi Kanu, who says he recently met Nnamdi Kanu and confirmed that the Nigerian government has been making repeated secret offers to him. These alleged offers, according to him, include asking Nnamdi Kanu to abandon the Biafra agitation entirely, join a political party, and accept huge financial rewards. One of the most shocking claims is that the government allegedly offered him 50 billion naira and an oil well in the Niger Delta in exchange for dropping the movement. He asserts that Nnamdi Kanu refused all offers, insisting that his mission is not personal enrichment, but securing Biafra's freedom. From this standpoint, Barrister Maxwell Opara argues that Nnamdi Kanu's imprisonment is not about any real crime, but rather a political punishment for his refusal to cooperate with the government's demands. He notes that lawyers, Government insiders and activists like Omoyele Sowore have confirmed that the government's tension with Nnamdi Kanu is politically motivated. He insists that despite the government charging Nnamdi Kanu with multiple offences, their willingness to offer him deals proves that the charges are not genuine. Before my analyst takes over, let's take a look at this.
I was with Nnamdi Kanu. We had a very fruitful meeting, and they've been making the offers for him to withdraw the agitation. Of course, you know Nnamdi Kanu. Nnamdi Kanu is not that kind of person. So I was with him.
Did Ojukwu cause any war? Go on is alive, then ask him. Did Ojukwu cause any war? Ojukwu went and negotiated restructuring with you. In Aburi, you came back. Britain told you not to agree because Britain realized that all the component units of Britain knows that if you go back to regionalism, you have economic growth. The country will do very well. But Britain doesn't want it. That was why they even instigated the Nzogbu, so-called Nzogbu, saying they would bring Awolowo to become the head of state. They knew what was going to happen. They wanted to truncate the economic miracle of Dr. Michael Opara. I'm telling you, fast, go and investigate for yourself.
Absolutely nothing. Nothing. I need them to understand this. We've crossed the Rubicon, the point of no return. There is nothing anybody can do. If I'm alive, if I'm dead, if I'm wherever I may be, the after will come. If I'm dead.
You had a meeting with Nnamdi Kanu, and that sparked, in fact,
New York.
I think you got arrested after that meeting. People would say, you are not fighting the same cause. You are fighting to be the president of the country. He is fighting to divide the country. People would say, why would you be seen in such a meeting? Would you like to clear that?
Anybody that lacks any sense of consciousness would ignore social movements to understand first what his struggle was about, which I knew already. And secondly, to also advise him on the way that I think we could all work together. And thirdly, to send a message to the Nigerian people that we can walk through our differences, even at these levels. And I was surprised that contrary to what some people are saying, he did not want Nigeria to break up. He wanted a Nigeria where the Igbo man can survive. But for an Igbo man to survive in Nigeria, as it is currently put together, Nigeria must break.
Wait, the meeting you had with Nnamdi Kanu.
Yes.
You are telling us now that Nnamdi Kanu, from what you understand from the meeting with him, he does not want Nigeria to break, to divide.
He said clearly that it is too late for Nigeria to come together. But he gave his conditions. We live streamed the meeting now. It's online.
Okay.
And part of it was live streamed. Some of them were private. But he said that he feels that if Nigeria were to respect certain protocols, including a referendum inserted in the constitution, and he still says it even now in court, that if he's released, he will go back and end the bloodshed. The bloodshed is in that part, and that a conversation can. He says that in every court appearance, that he's being held is not helping the opportunity to have a conversation about whatever it is, the unity you are begging for. But you see, Nigeria has a problem, and I've always said Nigeria has an Igbo problem. And I'm not saying it to please people who are known as Igbos. But the moment they decided to take the action they took in 1967 to 1970, the war, Nigeria, having won that war in their eyes, never forgave the Igbos. That is the reality. And if I were to be president of Nigeria today, the first thing I would do is to head to the Southeast and apologize to them for the war. Part of it is that I've never participated in it. And I cannot continue to fight a war that I did not engage in. And then ask them, what do we want?
So are you saying that the federal government has, even before
successive governments,
they've always had this anger against the Igbos?
There is a secret memo. I don't know where it is located in government. That whenever we want to take charge in this country, be careful of the Igbo. Don't give them position. Don't give them opportunity. Otherwise, they will overrun. It's a well-known fact. Even our parents, tell us, Igbo. You understand? Some of them even say unconsciously. They even say it on radio shows in this country. So don't let us lie to ourselves, because except we bring this out openly and discuss, it's a taboo that we have refused to discuss.
True.
We are not going to solve the problem. It is the reason why the federal government of Nigeria feels that in 2024, detaining Nnamdi Kanu against all the court orders, against all the court rulings, is the only way to go. You know, I was detained in the DSS place for 5 months.
Yes.
There is nothing there to detain anybody. For the place is not even functioning. The DSS headquarters. Yes, is it the same DSS people who are watching BB Nigeria from morning till night? No, it's true now. I was there with them for 5 months. I've said this publicly. So all the institutions in this country are broken down. But let's get back to a reality. One thing I've told people is that you are looking at Igbos as the only people who want to secede. But who in this country today has not mentally seceded from Nigeria? Mentally seceded. Who has not left? Except those who are trapped. If anybody in this country is working in a bank and he has 10 million naira and somebody say you can get into Canada, he will leave the next day.
I swear.
Is that not secession? What of secession is that you leave a country, you say to that country goodbye,
and not do it.
You get to the other country, you bow down, you touch the soil, and then you renounce your citizenship of the country you are coming from. Is that not what they call secession? So if you want to look at the number of people that have seceded in that Japa syndrome, there are more than all the Igbos combined together who are asking to leave. And in the process of keeping Nigeria united, we have let go of more citizens than the country should have. Yes.
So you think if they had, because I mean, from the last thing you said now, you say in the process of trying to keep Nigeria united,
yes,
we have let go of more citizens than we should have.
Of course.
So if we had allowed for the division or secession of Nigeria, most of our citizens that are outside would not have been outside.
No, you see, it is not the secession I'm talking about.
Okay, what are you talking about?
It is what led to the war that we did not address.
Okay.
And what happened after the war. Why is it that Nigeria hasn't been able to overcome the Biafran problem? It's because Nigeria never addressed what the Biafrans were asking for before the war.
What were they asking?
They were asking for to be treated not as second-class citizens in this country. Don't you know what happened, the court program in this country, where people were slaughtered and their bodies and their heads placed inside the train going down south? Yes, from the north, from the mid, the different parts of the north. Are we ignoring that? So
that happened
before the war. Before the war, that's what they call program. People who were settled, doing well, they were slaughtering them and sending their bodies and their heads inside Calabash and sending on trains that was heading east.
Were they Easterners?
They were Easterners. Why are you asking me? It's there in, go and Google it now. So you expect that will happen, and then there was a war that eviscerated 3 million people. Wow. And when the war was over, you just say, oh, nobody was vanquished, nobody was victorious. And then 3 hours. But you still kept a memo and said, don't trust them.
Collect people money,
yes,
give them 20 pounds.
And then you took their property. So Ojukwu did not get back JAMB until 1992, now his father's house, that is known as JAMB headquarters here in Ikoyi. It was after he came back from Ivory Coast. It was Babangida, I think, that gave him back their property. So any country that is perpetually carrying out systemic injustice against will lose more citizens than they should have.
Hey, are you still fighting the struggle to have independence for Biafra?
We are fighting for independence, not fighting physically with guns and bullets. We are fighting in terms of our agitation. We are fighting in terms of our belief. We're fighting in terms of our consistency to ensure that we are free, because we're not free. As a free people, we can afford to make life better for our people. Right now, we can't do that because of how Nigeria is structured and because of the very flawed foundations upon which Nigeria is.
You called for a referendum latest this year, November, you said, I think. If that doesn't happen, what's the way forward? Because the way it looks like the government will definitely not agree to that.
Then there'll be no elections in Biafra land. No more elections here. They can put whoever they like in office. They can do whatever they like with their political positions. We will not engage in any political process.
You said it's a peaceful struggle, but there are some videos of you appearing in the past, especially abroad, in particular in one conference in the US, where you said you need weapons to defend yourself. You need guns and ammunition. How can we understand that in the context that you're saying it's a peaceful struggle?
I'm sure you've heard about the Fulani headsmen killing people all over the place. Have you heard about it?
Exactly.
So how do you intend to defend yourself against Fulani headsmen without guns and bullets? They'll be killing our people, raping our women, destroying crops and farms, and no one does anything about it. Is that how human beings are supposed to live?
So, and you have the right to arm yourself and defend yourself with arms in that context?
Self-defense is recognized even by all the known laws of the UN. Is that not correct? We have the right. If somebody were to barge into this very interview now wielding a machete or an AK-47, are you suggesting we should let them get away with it?
You were detained for almost 2 years, from 2015 on, and actually there was no trial. No trial ever happened, and despite several court rulings that said you were supposed to be released, you were not released.
Yeah.
Do you think you were treated in a fair way by the government? Or rather also by the justice system?
No, not fairly, because Nigeria is not a civilized country. People behave like animals. They're not reasonable enough. They're not disciplined enough. They are not mentally developed enough to run a transparent civil society. For them, they have a feudal mindset where you have the ruling class and, a multitude of poverty-stricken people who never utters any word in rebellion or to even ask questions about their plight. That is one thing we're determined to challenge.
Don't you think you insult a lot of Nigerians?
Just allow us to go back to what we were before. No African came to Europe to create countries.
And honestly, it's the kind of situation that really makes you question what's happening behind closed doors in Nigerian politics. We're talking about Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, and some explosive claims that the Nigerian government has been desperately trying to cut deals with him while he sits in detention. This isn't just another news headline. This is about power, principle, historical wounds, and the future of Nigeria itself. So where do we even start with this? Well, the story breaks open with claims from barrister Maxwell Opara, who serves as one of Nnamdi Kanu'S legal representatives. According to him, he recently had access to Kanu in detention, and what Kanu told him is absolutely remarkable. The Nigerian government, he claims, hasn't just been holding Kanu as a criminal suspect awaiting trial. Instead, they've allegedly been making him offer after offer, trying to get him to abandon the Biafra cause entirely. And we're not talking about small offers here. We're talking about the kind of money and resources that would set up multiple generations of any family for life. Think about this for a moment. The alleged offer included 50 billion naira, that's billion with a B, in a country where most people struggle to make ends meet, where the minimum wage is a subject of endless political wrangling. We're talking about an offer that would make Kanu one of the wealthiest individuals in the entire country overnight. But wait, there's more. The offer allegedly also included an oil well in the Niger Delta. Now, if you know anything about Nigerian politics and wealth, you know that oil wells are essentially money-printing machines. They represent generational wealth, political influence, and economic power that very few people in Nigeria ever get to touch. So, what was the catch? According to these claims, all Kanu had to do was walk away from the Biafra agitation, possibly join a political party, and basically become part of the establishment he's been fighting against. Imagine that scenario for a second. The man who has spent years calling for Biafran independence, who has mobilized millions of people across the southeast and beyond, who has been labeled a terrorist by some and a freedom fighter by others, suddenly showing up at a political party convention, smiling for cameras, and telling everyone to forget about Biafra and embrace one Nigeria. That would have been one of the most dramatic political U-turns in Nigerian history. But here's where the story gets really interesting. According to Barrister Opara, Kanu rejected these offers flat out. He didn't negotiate. He didn't ask for more money or better terms. He simply said no. His position, as relayed by his lawyer, is that he's not in this fight for personal enrichment. He's in it because he believes in the cause of Biafra, and no amount of money or personal comfort is going to make him abandon millions of people who see him as their voice, their hope, and their leader. Now, let me pause here and say something important. Whether you agree with Kanu's methods or not, whether you support Biafran independence or believe in one Nigeria, you have to admit there's something compelling about someone turning down that kind of wealth and security for a principle. In Nigerian politics, where switching parties for money is common, where politicians regularly abandon their platforms for appointments and cash, someone saying no to 50 billion naira is almost unheard of. It's the kind of thing that either makes someone look incredibly principled or incredibly stubborn, depending on your perspective. Barrister Opara's interpretation of all this is fascinating. He argues that Kanu's continued detention isn't really about the charges against him, it's punishment. The government, in his view, is frustrated that Kanu won't play ball, won't take the deal, won't become the kind of agitator who can be bought off and neutralized. So instead, they keep him locked up, going through legal motions that everyone knows could be resolved if Kanu would just accept one of their offers. This perspective is backed up by other voices mentioned in the report. Activists, lawyers, and even people described as government insiders have apparently been saying similar things. The consistent message is that this whole situation is political theater.
The criminal charges, the court appearances, the legal arguments, all of it is supposedly just window dressing for what's really a political standoff between a determined activist and a government that doesn't know how to handle him. One of the most interesting voices brought into this discussion is Omuyele Sowore. Now, Sowore himself is no stranger to government detention and political pressure. He's been through his own battles with Nigerian authorities, so when he speaks about Kanu's situation, he's speaking from experience. According to the report, Sowore made some really thought-provoking points during a live podcast about what Kanu actually wants. Sowore's take is that Kanu isn't some unreasonable separatist who just hates Nigeria and wants to destroy it. Instead, Kanu's journey started with something much more moderate. He wanted restructuring. He wanted a Nigeria where Igbo people, and indeed all ethnic groups, could exist fairly, where resources would be controlled more locally, where the heavy hand of central government wouldn't dominate everything. This wasn't a radical position. In fact, restructuring has been discussed by politicians across Nigeria for decades. It's been in party manifestos. It's been the subject of constitutional conferences. Everyone talks about it. But here's the thing. Talking about restructuring and actually doing it are two completely different things. According to this narrative, Kanu spent time advocating for restructuring. He made his case. He used his platform to push for these changes. And the government's response? Nothing. Or worse than nothing, rejection. They wouldn't engage seriously with the idea. They wouldn't come to the table for real negotiations. They treated his calls for restructuring the same way Nigerian governments have treated similar calls for generations, with indifference, delay, and ultimately dismissal. So what does someone do when they've tried the moderate path and gotten nowhere? According to Sowore's analysis, that's when Kanu shifted to full independence advocacy. That's when the call for restructuring became a call for Biafra. If Nigeria won't reform itself, if it won't create space for Igbo people to thrive within its structure, then maybe the answer isn't reform but separation. It's a logical progression, even if you disagree with the conclusion. Sowore also raises what I think is one of the most damning questions in this whole affair. He asks why, if Kanu is genuinely a criminal, if he's truly committed the serious crimes he's charged with, would the government be offering him deals? Think about that. When you arrest someone for terrorism or treasonable felony, you don't typically offer them billions of naira and oil wells to drop the charges. You prosecute them, you present your evidence, you let the court decide. The fact that deals are allegedly being offered suggests that the government knows this isn't really about criminal justice, it's about politics. This brings us to something deeper, something that runs through this entire story like a dark thread. Somewhere calls it the Igbo problem, and is referring to something that Nigerians of a certain age remember vividly and younger Nigerians have inherited as historical trauma. We're talking about the Nigerian Civil War, the Biafran War, which lasted from 1967 to 1970 and cost somewhere between 1 and 3 million lives, depending on whose estimate you believe. The Civil War didn't start in a vacuum. It came after pogroms in northern Nigeria where Igbo people were killed in large numbers. It came after political instability and coups that left Igbo people feeling unsafe in their own country. And when the war ended, the famous policy of reconciliation, reconstruction, and reintegration was announced. But ask most Igbo people, especially older ones, and they'll tell you the reconciliation was incomplete at best and a lie at worst. Properties abandoned during the war were seized. Bank accounts were frozen or confiscated. The famous 20 pounds policy meant that no matter how much money you had in the bank before the war, you got 20 pounds after it. Imagine being a wealthy businessman who fled for safety, only to return and find everything you built reduced to essentially nothing. That kind of economic devastation affects generations. It means children who should have inherited wealth and opportunity started from scratch. It means an entire ethnic group was economically handicapped in ways that still echo today. And it wasn't just about money. The report mentions systemic discrimination that continued after the war. The federal character principle was supposed to ensure representation, but many Igbo people feel they've been systematically excluded from key positions in the military, the security services, and federal agencies. They point to infrastructure development that seems to avoid the Southeast. They talk about federal projects that go everywhere else but seem to skip over Igbo areas. Now, I want to be careful here because there are definitely people who would dispute this narrative. There are non-Igbo Nigerians who feel their own ethnic groups have been marginalized. There are people who argue that Igbo people are actually very successful in business and trade and shouldn't complain. There are those who say that every group in Nigeria has grievances and playing the victim doesn't help anyone. These are legitimate perspectives in a complex country with over 250 ethnic groups and a history of rotating grievances. But what you can't deny is that for a significant number of Igbo people, these feelings are real. The sense of being unwelcome in your own country, of having fought a war and lost, not just politically but also economically and socially, of watching your parents and grandparents carry that pain, that's really lived the experience for millions of people. And into that environment of historical pain and contemporary frustration steps someone like Nnamdi Kanu. Kanu didn't create these feelings. He didn't invent the sense of marginalization. What he did was give it a voice, a focus, and a political program. Through Radio Biafra and later through social media and public appearances, he articulated what many people felt but couldn't express. He connected historical injustices to present realities. He gave people hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a path to dignity and self-determination. The report mentions that before his arrest and detention, Kanu appeared in countless videos condemning killings in Nigeria and calling for global attention to injustice. This is significant because it shows that his activism wasn't happening in secret. He was public, vocal, and consistent. He talked about farmers being killed by herders in their own communities. He talked about kidnappings. He talked about what he saw as the federal government's selective approach to security, protecting some communities while leaving others vulnerable. One particularly interesting claim from Sowore is that Kanu has talked about self-defense. In a country where certain communities feel under attack, where farmers fear going to their own farms, where people are kidnapped from their homes, the question of self-defense becomes complicated. When government security forces seem unable or unwilling to protect you, when calling the police might mean nothing happens for hours or days, what do? Kanu's answer apparently has included supporting the idea that communities should be able to defend themselves. Now, this is obviously controversial. The Nigerian government sees this as incitement to violence or even as supporting terrorism. Kanu supporters see it as a natural right of self-preservation. The truth, as always, is probably complicated. In some cases, self-defense has remained genuinely defensive. In other cases, things have escalated into attacks, violence against security forces, and actions that look a lot more like insurgency than self-defense. Sorting out where legitimate security concerns end and criminal violence begins is messy, and it's made messier by genuine grievances on multiple sides. The report also touches on something that I find historically fascinating. It mentions the Aburi Accord, an agreement reached between Nigerian leader Yakubu Gowon and Biafran leader Odumegwu Ojukwu in 1967 in Aburi, Ghana. The Aburi Accord was essentially an agreement to restructure Nigeria into a confederation with more regional autonomy. If it had been implemented, it might have prevented the civil war entirely. But according to this narrative, when Gowon returned to Nigeria, he was influenced to abandon the agreement. The report specifically mentions British influence, suggesting that Britain, Nigeria's former colonial power, preferred a strong central government that would be easier to deal with, especially when it came to protecting British economic interests, particularly oil.
Whether you fully accept that explanation or not, the fact remains that the Aburi Accord wasn't implemented, the war happened, and Nigeria emerged as a highly centralized federation rather than the more loose confederation that Aburi might have created. And here we are, more than 50 years later, still arguing about restructuring. The same questions that were on the table in Aburi are still being debated today. How much power should states have? How should resources be controlled? How do we balance national unity with regional autonomy? These questions haven't been answered. They've just been postponed repeatedly for decades. So when we return to the present situation with Nnamdi Kanu, we're not really just talking about one man's detention or one activist's choices. We're talking about the accumulation of decades of unresolved questions, unhealed wounds, and unaddressed grievances. Kanu has become a symbol, and symbols are hard to negotiate with because they carry weight far beyond the individual person. The alleged government offers to Kanu, if true, reveal something important about how Nigerian political power works. It's transactional. The assumption seems to be that everyone has a price, that political activism is ultimately about personal advancement, and that with enough money and privileges, anyone can be brought into the system. This isn't unique to Nigeria, of course. Political cooptation is a strategy used everywhere. But there's something particularly bold about allegedly offering someone 50 billion naira and an oil well. It suggests either complete confidence that the strategy will work or complete desperation because nothing else has worked. And think about what it means if these offers are being made and rejected. It means that from the government's perspective, they will rather pay enormous sums and give away valuable resources than actually engage with the fundamental questions Kanu is raising. They will rather buy him off than restructure Nigeria. They will rather make one man wealthy than address the concerns of millions. That's a remarkable admission of priorities if the allegations are true. From Kanu's perspective, according to his lawyer, this isn't about him at all. It's about a cause bigger than any individual. It's about people who feel they don't have a voice in their own country. It's about communities that feel targeted. It's about a region that feels marginalized. If he accepts the government's offers, he betrays all of those people. He becomes just another activist who sold out for personal gain. His detention, his suffering, his sacrifice, all of it would be for nothing if he walks away now. But let's also be honest about the complexity here. While Kanu has supporters who see him as a hero, there are also people, including in the southeast, who have complicated feelings about him. Some people support the general idea of addressing Igbo marginalization but don't support separatism. Some people support restructuring but think Kanu's methods are too confrontational.
Some people worry that the unrest and insecurity associated with agitations and enforcement of sit-at-home orders have damaged the Southeast economy more than they've helped the cause. Business owners have lost money, workers have lost income, students have missed school. These are real costs that real people have paid, and not everyone is convinced it's worth it. There are also people in other parts of Nigeria who see Kanu as a dangerous, divisive figure who threatens national unity. They point to violence associated with groups claiming to support the Biafran cause. They worry about the precedent of allowing secessionist movements. They argue that if every aggrieved group in Nigeria pursued separation, the country would fragment into chaos. These aren't unreasonable concerns either, even if you disagree with the conclusion. What Sowore says at the end of his analysis is particularly insightful. He notes that Nigeria's problems persist despite Kanu's detention. The insecurity hasn't stopped. The economic challenges haven't disappeared. The political dysfunction continues. This suggests that Kanu isn't actually Nigeria's problem. He is a symptom of Nigeria's problems. The fundamental structure of the country, the way power is distributed, the way resources are controlled, the way different groups relate to each other and to the federal government, these are the actual problems. Locking up Kanu doesn't solve any of them.
It just removes one very vocal person who was pointing them out. This is why the alleged offers to Kanu are so significant. If the government really believed Kanu was the problem, they would simply prosecute him and move on. But the offers suggest they understand that Kanu represents something much larger. They understand that even if they successfully prosecute him, even if they keep him in detention for years, the underlying issues don't go away. The feelings of marginalization don't disappear. The calls for restructuring or self-determination don't end. Someone else will emerge to carry the same message because the message resonates with real experiences and real grievances. So where does this leave us? We have a government that allegedly wants to make a deal, but can't admit publicly that it's political rather than criminal. We have an activist who reportedly refuses to compromise on principles even at enormous personal cost. We have millions of people watching this drama play out, with some seeing Kanu as a hero, others as a troublemaker, and still others with mixed feelings about the whole situation. And underneath it all, we have the same unresolved questions about Nigeria's structure, unity, and future that have been with the country since independence. The prediction from Barrister Ogbara that the government will eventually have to negotiate with Kanu publicly is interesting. It suggests that the current strategy of detention and alleged secret offers isn't sustainable. At some point, something has to give. Either the government finds a way to genuinely resolve the charges and address the underlying political issues, or they keep Kanu in detention indefinitely and turn him into an even more powerful symbol. Or they continue the current stalemate where nothing really gets resolved, but everyone remains stuck in their positions. What makes this whole situation even more complex is that it's not happening in isolation. Nigeria is facing enormous challenges right now. The economy is struggling. Insecurity is widespread across multiple regions, not just the Southeast. There are agitations and conflicts in different parts of the country. The political system itself seems increasingly unable to address basic governance questions. In this context, the Kanu situation is both a specific issue and part of a larger pattern of unresolved conflict and delayed solutions. What we're really looking at here isn't just a story about one man and his detention. It's a story about how Nigeria deals with dissent, how it addresses historical grievances, how it negotiates between unity and diversity, and whether it can find ways to accommodate different visions of what the country should be. Their left offers to Kanu, his reported refusal, the legal drama, the political maneuvering, all of it is ultimately about these bigger questions. And until Nigeria finds a way to actually address these fundamental issues, rather than just managing symptoms and personalities, we're likely to see variations of this same story play out again and again, with different actors but the same underlying dynamics. That's perhaps the most sobering conclusion of all.
This is the end of our news update. Please click the icon on the top right corner of your screen to watch my next video. You will enjoy it. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.